my channel, and if you're new here, my name is Miles and I make book content. Please join the bestie fam. We do vlogs, sit down videos, and make sure you like and subscribe, and you'll have plenty of videos coming. The month of January, aka maybe the longest month ever, like it's always the longest, dreariest month, I read 10 books. And I want to go over all 10 books that I read with you, whether I like them, my ratings on them. In the month of January, I read 2 romance books, 2 literary fictions, 4 fantasy books, and 2 thrillers. So I DNF'd one book, which was Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. This book, I don't think it helped that I'm really not in the romance mood, but this book just did not do it for me, to be honest. Let's get into the 10 books that I read in the month of January and how I feel about them. Starting out the bat, I read Glow of the Everflame. This is the second book in the Kindred Curse series, and I loved this series. I want to say the second book I thought was like almost just as good as the first. Of course, that she was like extra annoying. So if you guys don't know, this book is kind of somewhat a dystopian. You have the Descended and then you have the Mortals. The Mortals are almost like second class, or are second class citizens. They don't have powers. They're on the outskirts, and the Descended live a life of royalty, and they have a king and a queen, and they want to keep the Mortals separate. Character Diem, she's from the mortal world, and she doesn't know who her father is, but she was adopted. Her mom has disappeared. Her mom was a healer, so she is working as a healer. She made a deal with Luther from the Descended, who is in the royal family, and she doesn't quite know what the deal was. Her mom has now disappeared, and she's trying to find answers. And this is the second installment, so I can't really tell you guys specifics about this book because that would be giving it away. I absolutely love Luther. I thought this author did a really good job with this one, where she didn't do like this typical formula that is in a fantasy book. I thought that Diem's character is really interesting. There's somewhat of like a love triangle going on with one of her childhood friends, and she's kind of stuck between, you know, what she's always been known and taught and what she's learning now, being more in the Descended world. So I love this. I ended up giving this one a 4.5. There's one more book left in the series, which is Heat of the Everflame, and that one's 1,000 pages, and I'm not really sure. I'm not ready for it, but I will be reading it, and this is one of my favorite series that I started in 2024. Next, we have Blood of Hercules. This is about a girl named Alexis, and she grew up really poor and had foster parents that abused her, and she has a foster brother. She goes to school one day and she takes a test, and they find out that she is in fact a Spartan and not immortal like she thought her whole life. They take her to this war academy, and it's Spartan War Academy, and you just have to see if you have what it takes to be an immortal. Along the way, people just don't believe she belongs, and she has mentors, and she has a professor, and the school is like completely brutal. People die along the way, and they really try to knock out the weak. She is kind of introduced to this lifestyle where it is very like sexual based. People just have these like crazy orgy parties. They take on more than one lover, and she almost is like kind of feeling stalked. This is like borderline. This book is borderline. I felt like predatory towards her, which I think is kind of the vibe that they were going for, but like she's very innocent and they're very like predatory, but she like doesn't really think that they like her because she's never been like sexualized before. It was very odd. It was not my favorite. I gave it a 3-star because I thought it was entertaining. However, I just thought the story had so many like missing plot points. I like the transition from scene to scene was very choppy, and I found it hard to keep track of like where we were and what we were doing, and it wasn't my favorite. I thought the writing was kind of bad, and I gave it a 3-star just for entertainment purposes only, but I would not be continuing the series, and I wouldn't recommend it. But Somewhere Beyond the Sea, this is the second book in the House of the Cruelin Sea series. When I first read House of the Cruelin Sea, I did not know it was going to be a series, and they wrote a second one. And that was one of my favorite books still to all time. If you don't know, it's about magical creatures. They're kids, and they go to this orphanage, and Arthur goes and he works for basically like the government for these children, and he goes to this orphanage. He ends up falling in love with them, and he's trying to get rights for them because they think of them as beings. They want them like separated, they want them caged, and they're just honestly little kids, and all the kids have their own little quirks. Like one's a yeti, one's a squid. There's Lucy. Lucy is like a devil, but he's so stinking cute. Chauncey, he just wants to be a bellhop, and that's all he wants to be, is a bellhop, and it is so cute. This book is really cozy, so heartwarming. Do I think it needed a second installment? I don't think it needed one. However, I am glad I read it because it was good to just be in this world again and see these characters again and see the kids and kind of have that ending to the story. So I don't think it's necessary if you read the first book, but if you really liked the first book, I think you will enjoy this one just to keep on reading about it. So I ended up giving that one a 4-star. The second book in the Beartown series, the Beartown series is so near and dear to my heart. Oh my gosh. And just like the first book, the second book broke me. If you don't know what the Beartown series is, this is by Fredrik Backman. There is a movie on the first one, but it is a hockey town and nothing else goes in this town but hockey. There's no industry there anymore. There's barely any jobs. It's a small town. It's a really dying out town, and the only thing they have is hockey. They have a good hockey team and everything around it, and you kind of see how hockey brings out the best and the worst in people, and their morals are tested and things that happen. So in the first book, something really tragic happened to the hockey coach's daughter, and you see where he's really torn between morals and doing what's right, and you see the town take sides and what they'll do to kind of turn a blind eye just for the sake of hockey and what people can get away with. So it follows a lot of different people, but he does it in such a way that is so good. Like, I can't stand books that are multiple point of views, but this one has so many, but the way he writes it, it's so clear of like who you're following. You go deep into like a lot of people in the town's lives and what they're struggling with, and you will get so attached to these characters and the things that happen, and he kind of foreshadows the whole book, so you're just like waiting for what's gonna happen. You don't know what's gonna happen, but you know that like something is like building up. The entire time in this book, I feel like it's like tense. It's like building up, and it is so good. Never in a million years did I think I'd be so obsessed with a book about hockey, but really it's not about hockey. It's kind of about the people and what people will do. Like, they have one thing and they come together, but it also like tears them apart and brings out the worst in people. I gave this one a 5-star, just like I did Beartown. There's one book left in the series, so the winners, which I'm nervous because people say it like broke them. So next we have We Used to Live Here. I gave this one a 4-star. This book was insane. So the lore behind this book is this guy wrote this book he wrote the story on Reddit, and it was so popular and it gained so much traction that it actually got published into a story. So you have a young couple named Charlie and Eve, and they flip houses. So they bought this house and they didn't really know if they were gonna have to condemn it or what's gonna happen to it, but that's like their job. They flip the houses and sell it. So this is a house way out in the country near nothing. Eve kind of did not want to buy this house, but Charlie, her partner, was like, let's just do it. So they're at the house, and this family comes up, and he's like a mom, 2 sons and a daughter. He's like, hi, we used to live here. I used to live here as a child. Is it okay if I show my family around? And she's like a known people pleaser, so she's feeling weird about it. She's like, no. But then she feels bad because they seem like such a nice family and they just seem disheartened by it. And that is the worst thing she could have done because they overstay their welcome, and the kids are creepy and weird stuff starts happening, and you learn more and more and more. It is just insane. The whole book, you have this like eerie feeling like you know something's just not right. You just are like, oh my gosh, like what is going to happen? And I breezed through this book. I had such a good time with it. I do wish the ending was a bit more clear on what happened, but they kind of leave it up for you to guess. Like, I went down a rabbit hole on Reddit about a book that started on Reddit just to see what other people's theories were. So that's when you know a book was good, but I breezed through it. It was really good. Probably one of my favorite thrillers I read. Well, it's this year, but like of all time, honestly, like Husband and Lovers by Beatrice Williams. I gave this one a 3-star. I almost DNF'd this book at first, but people say to like keep hanging in there. It gets better, it gets better. And I do agree, it did get better. The start was really, really slow. But this book is about a single mother named Mallory, and her son goes to summer camp, and he's allergic to peanuts, and he ends up in the hospital. Here, her son has kidney problems, and she's like kind of an overprotective mother, especially now. So she goes with her sister and her friends, and she goes back to a summer house that she used to visit all the time and work at this house. And it kind of goes back into her past because her son doesn't know who the father is, and you soon learn who the father is of her child, and you learn some secrets that happen. And I really, really love the relationship that was between her and the father's dad. And I was really annoyed with her the entire book because I just don't believe in the whole, like, I'm not gonna tell you who your father is even though you're 12 years old and you keep asking me. And I couldn't figure out for a long time, like, I was just annoyed. But they finally tell you the reason, and you know, it's understandable. But it took a long time to get there, so I was annoyed most of the book. But the kid's father in this book is what kept me reading it, and I did love their relationship. So I ended up giving this one a 3-star. I probably wouldn't recommend it to people just because of how slow it was, and it's like, but it's like very literary fiction. But I'm glad I got it off my TBR because I had it on there for quite a while. Next, I tried to read Not in Love. I did end up DNFing this book. I just didn't interest me, honestly. I realized that Ali Hazelwood books just honestly might not be for me. I felt like she was a pick-me and just is like, I don't want love, like I hate love and just issues, and he was like into her, but I don't know. The whole thing kind of cringed me out a little bit and I just didn't care, so I DNF'd that book. I didn't get too far into it, maybe about 30%. The Drowning Woman. As I said, I'm in my thriller era by Robin Harding. I don't know if this book was sent to me or if my fiance bought this book for me. I honestly don't know how I acquired it, but I ended up giving this one a 3.75 star. This book is about a woman named Lee, and she owned a restaurant, and she ended up making a sketchy deal in 2020 because the restaurant business was dying and she wanted to keep her restaurant, and that sketchy deal went sideways when she was making no money. So she ultimately fears for her life and she ends up running away, and she is now homeless. She has nothing, so she ends up sleeping on the streets and her car. So her car is like her home. So she ends up living in her car, and she goes into a rich person's neighborhood because she's like, at least here I'll be safe. The worst they can do is call the cops on me, but at least nothing bad will happen to me in this neighborhood. And she sees a woman drowning, a name named Hazel, and she goes and saves her. And her and Hazel strike up this unlikely friendship, but Hazel is very rich, but she has a very controlling husband, and she's trying to get away from her husband. So they think that they can both help each other. There's lots of twists and turns into this book. It was definitely a little predictable towards the end, but there's definitely a lot more drama that goes into this book and more characters you meet, and I was entertained the entire way through. It will suck you in and you'll keep going because you just want to know what's going to happen. But like I said, it was a little predictable, and I felt like the ending was a little lackluster for all the buildup that it had, but it was a solid thriller and it was quick and fast, and that's kind of what I look for in my thrillers. Next up, we have Shatter Me. I kind of did a little read it on haul. I have had this book on my TBR for over a year, and I was like, I need to read this book, or I need to like throw it out. So I'm actually really glad I read it. It is very YA, but it also came out over 11 years ago. So I'm like well aware. Oh no, over 15 years ago this book came out. Yes, so I ended up giving this one a 3.8 star, and this follows a girl named Juliet, and she is in this prison, and it is because her touch is deadly. So they're like, you're a psycho, but she's in this dystopian world where everything is dead. They're trying to make a perfect society. There's no businesses, so they don't want anyone to live by free will. They want everyone to like speak one language. Everyone's the same, but of course that's like all dystopians, it's not the case. There's kind of like this dictator that you will meet named Warren, and he comes into play. So basically she gets out of this prison and she meets Adam and new characters that are working for Warren, and she is not happy about where she is, but she really wants to get her freedom outside of this prison that she's been living in. Hell, parents didn't want her, and they're trying to use her touch for bad. And it follows this plot line. I will say that this book was entertaining. I did feel like there wasn't a lot of world building and it could have really been built up, but I do know this is like a really long series of lots of novellas. So people told me to keep going because I was like, I don't know if I should keep reading this, but people say the second book is really good and it gets more in-depth and things. So this is definitely like a starter book for the series, and I'm glad I read it. So I will be reading Unravel Me. I already own it, which is great. So I'm glad to get into this. People said to keep reading, so I will keep reading this, but I gave this one a 3.8 and it reads very YA. It's quick. I could have read it in one sitting, honestly. That's how quick it went. Then I read Beg, Borrow, or Steal. This is the third book in the When in Rome series. This was Fred Forestera's book club, and I was pleasantly surprised with this one. I ended up giving this one a 4 star. This is a rivals to lovers, and this is about a girl named Emily, and she is a teacher. And if you read all the other books that follow her siblings, they are kind of loved up with their partners, and she's realizing her siblings don't need her anymore because their parents passed away when they were young, and this is the oldest sister, and she's like, nobody needs me, and she's really feeling left behind. So you meet Jack, who is her rival. They met back in college and they started off on the wrong foot, and then they ended up being teachers together, but they just never really got along. He ends up moving away because he gets engaged, and then he ends up coming back because the engagement is off. And he's like kind of down bad for Emily, and she doesn't know it. They end up in a situation where she ends up accidentally sending her draft of a book that is very spicy, principal of the school, and they're trying to get it back together. The tension in this book was so good. The banter was so good in this book. The scenes that they had, he was helping her write her book, and they were acting like kind of helping her because he's also secretly a writer. I just love their tension and a lot of the emails. One thing I really liked about this was that their banter was very realistic, and I like found myself laughing at their interactions, and I love that we were able to see the other characters in this found family, and I just really enjoyed this book. I had a good time with it, and I think this is definitely her best book in the When in Rome series, and I think she knocked it out of the park with this one, to be honest. Last but not least, we have Lost and Lassoed by Lila Sage. This follows Teddy and Wes. This is the oldest brother. Teddy is Emmy's best friend, who you meet in the first book, and she is a fashion designer. She's really creative, and her store ends up going out of business. She needs a job, and Wes is a single father, and the baby mama is away, so he has his daughter full time. And I loved the way that they wrote Gus. She's dating Gus. Gus is the oldest brother, and she ends up being his nanny, but they do not like each other. Gus thinks that Teddy is loud, obnoxious, and attention. He's a grumpy cowboy, so they've never ever gotten along. But Emmy's like, why don't you have Teddy help you with Riley, your daughter? And I loved Riley in this book. She was so sweet. She was so cute. Lila Sage, thank you for writing a kid as a kid. I cannot stand when authors write books for kids as adults, and she knocked it out of the park with this one, and I really enjoyed it. I felt like the tension was there so much. I ended up giving this one a 4-star. Only problem I had with this one is I do wish the slow burn was a bit slower. I feel like the slow burn was happening, and then all of a sudden we kind of just switched, and I was like, wait, what happened? Like, we switched too quickly, and I wish there was more build up to them doing that, like enemies to lovers or rivals to lovers. I think it happened a little too quick. However, I just loved I love the found family. This is definitely the best book in the series by far. I enjoyed Teddy so much. You really got to know her as a character, and you really got to know Gus as a character, and kind of how he ended up having a soft spot and them changing their opinions on each other when they actually took time to get to know each other. So, and I'm really excited for the next one. It's hinting toward his baby mamas in book, and Cam and Dusty, which I'm really excited for that one. So I will say this was a good reading month. These are the 10 books that I read in January. Oh my gosh, I've been talking so long. I'm like kind of stumped on a TBR. I don't know what I want to read next. Kind of just been mood reading, and I haven't really been sticking to a TBR. So these were random. Never did I think I would end up reading this stack of books for January. So who knows what we'll get up to. But thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you guys like and subscribe and stick around for more videos. Love you so much. Bye.